Welcome to Take It from the Ironwoman. My name is Susanne Mueller, your host and the Ironwoman. This podcast is about empowering yourself and others to make real changes in the world. You will hear from everyday, smart, sophisticated, hip people like you and me. Not everybody has to be an Ironwoman to impress the world. Together, we will learn from the sports and business leaders how you can become a more successful person as an entrepreneur or a leader. It's one step at a time, one day at a time. Take your steps now. Take your big steps now. Join me on this journey to success. Take it from the Ironwoman. We only have special guests, and today is really somebody special. Steve. He has been my coach for the podcasting. I learned everything from him. He has been part of my journey, so I'm really grateful that we can talk to each other. We don't want to talk too much podcasting because you have an interesting podcast about alpacas. Welcome, Steve. Introduce yourself. What can we learn from you and where are you today?
Thanks, Susanna. It's great to be here. Thanks very much for having me on your show. It's been an interesting journey, that whole thing with podcasting. It's a funny story, actually, because my wife was writing a book. Because of that, she didn't have, when we heard about the podcasting workshop, we didn't have time for her to do the podcasting workshop. Okay, well, I'll do the workshop. And then when we get to do her podcast, I'll know what to do. And then in the middle of this, I suddenly discovered, I've got to do something. I've got to actually do this, haven't I? What shall I do the podcast about? Alpacas. That's a good idea. And, it's really funny. I claim anyway, I'm the only alpaca podcast in the world. I don't seem to, there's some bits and pieces on YouTube. There are some alpaca in the name of podcasts, but it's about nothing to do with alpacas, or it's a bit of someone who's got a thing about knitting and they've mentioned alpacas, but they've got an episode, but it's not the same. That's been an interesting journey of kind of accidentally starting, but then falling in love with the process, but also the Alpaca Tribe podcast, which has just reached just over 220 episodes. Wow, this is incredible. How did that happen?
Sometimes we fall into something. When I saw the podcasting fellowship, I thought, I always wanted to interview people. Little did I know that it takes so much to do the editing, to upload the social media, and also booking the guests.
And you kind of go, what have I got myself into?
I know.
It's interesting. Recently, I found myself saying, actually, I've always been a podcaster, even before I started podcasting, because it's such a good fit. It's a natural part of me. It's a natural expression of who I am somehow. It brings a lot of threads together that I unexpectedly. It's not about the audio and the technical stuff, although it is that. It's not about the interviewing, although that's part. There's something about just the whole thing which really fits me very well. That was a good find.
And what is that for you? This is very interesting for me.
Well, I think there's a lot of side benefits to podcasting that I was surprised by, and I wasn't expecting to find that it helped me think. I wasn't expecting that it would help me communicate. Although I'm going to become a better communicator because I'm podcasting. But actually, I found it wasn't just when I was podcasting, it wasn't just when I was recording things, but it was in conversations with anybody. The whole process of thinking, planning, how am I delivering this? What's my thought? How do I get that across in a way that resonates with the people I'm imagining on the other side of the mic? I found that I slowed down in the way I was speaking. I tend to get excited. I get very fast and I swallow the end of the sentences and don't finish sentences properly. I get in trouble for that. That changed, and I found myself better able to speak, but even more importantly, better able to listen. I found that talking to people, I could tune in more to what was being said, and my curiosity always gets the better of me. So it's kind of, why is that? I'm always wanting to explore the question, or the answer that comes back automatically produces another question that wants to go a bit deeper and wants to go a bit further. And I've got a natural interest in people and what they're involved in. With the podcasting about alpacas, I started off with a plan that it was going to be for this person. It was going to be for people who had a few alpacas, who'd bought them, had an idea, a dream of what it was going to be like to have alpacas, and then found that the reality wasn't quite like that.
When I prepared for this podcast, I was actually thinking, I don't know much about alpacas. I grew up in a city, and people think, oh, she grew up in Switzerland. She must live on an Alp and has cows. No, none of this. I grew up in a city with 40,000 people. So what do I know about alpacas? I know they have nice wool. You get alpaca sweaters, but that's about all I know. And you see them in the zoos. I'm assuming some of my listeners who are global, and we have a podcast in all the continents except Antarctica. I hope we find
We're working
somebody.
on that one. We're working on that one. I don't think there's any alpacas there.
No, but we're working on that guest in the Antarctica. We also have episodes in English, Spanish, German, Swiss German, and now in French. I know a lot of things, languages, traveling, but nothing about alpaca. So how can that be? And I'm assuming the listeners might also be interested. Should we get an alpaca at home, or what do you do with the alpacas? How many do you have?
Give you a taste. Okay, now you've got another one. That was me speaking alpaca. Did you hear that? So they make this interesting sound, the sound of a happy alpaca is... Okay, that was a happy alpaca. Alpacas are quiet. They're very thoughtful. You go and you look at the alpacas, and I've had people would come and visit the alpacas, and they were coming to see the alpacas. And you suddenly notice that they're actually looking at you. The alpacas are looking at the people, and they're very attentive. They're very calming to be around, very quiet most of the time. But they do they make a humming sound. And if they get stressed, and if they're the humming gets louder and gets more insistent, and they're talking to the babies, the females will talk to their young, and there's this kind of communication that's going on. But there's a lot of other communication. They're a herd animal, so they're expected to be in groups of, well, is two a herd? It's not really a herd. Our experience has been that two is absolute minimum, but really you need three at least, because the dynamic changes. And as you get the numbers going up, they become much more natural in their behavior as alpacas. They're originally from South America. So they're part of a group called South American camelids. Camelid meaning like a camel, except they're kind of like a camel, but they're not. But you've got two that people would probably be familiar with. You've got the alpacas and you've got llamas. Llamas are taller and bigger. They're the bigger cousin of the alpaca. That's the other thing people know about them. You've then got guanaco and vicuña, which are the wild versions. And in the high plains, the altiplano, the high plains of Peru, of course, it doesn't follow just the boundaries of the countries. You've got Peru, Chile, Bolivia. There's all that kind of area. It's the high plains of the Andes. That's where they're coming from. They're very high altitude. They've got this amazing fleece, which is incredibly light, very warm, good insulation, and that they need it because for 3/4 of the year, they're very high altitude. They got very intense sun during the day, but they got sub-zero temperatures at night. So they've got to be able to cope with this kind of big switch of temperatures, and they cope really well. Now here in our little valley here in South Wales, in Swansea, in South Wales, that's kind of a bump over on the west beyond England. It's a separate country, but it's part of the UK. We get a lot of rain. It's very green here, but we get a lot of rain. And do they like the rain? Does anybody? What is day after day after day after day? They feel a bit like they're a bit miserable and they're not enjoying the rain. But most of the time, they cope really well. They're stargazers by nature. They like to be outside. If they can be outside, they will be outside. And when it's frosty, when it's cold through the winter, when it's frosty, you'll see patches in the morning. I see this funny pattern on the grass where they've been sat down. And the frost is on them, not the ground. So when they get up and walk away, there's this little shape of where they were sat down, which is really interesting to be able to see. They sit in little groups, little family groups, and they have friends. They have animals that they get on well with, and some that they don't get on quite so well with. Very much, though, see themselves as the group. And they have amazing interactions. And when they've got the babies around, you'll have a little creche will develop, a little collection of the youngsters. And one of the adults just will tend to sit down as well. And then you've got this little collection of the youngsters who are kind of a couple of months old or whatever. And they're waiting because mum's gone off to eat grass to get milk. The baby's, well, we're not eating grass yet, so we're just going to sit here and wait till mum comes back with the milk. That's an interesting little dynamic where the group will look out for the welfare of the babies, even if it's not their baby. This herd thing is very strong. We got 36. We've got a bunch of boys there's only about 9 of those. And we've got them, a number of those we use as stud males. And then the other group is the mums and the youngsters who are now, I think the youngest are about 18 months plus. So we didn't have any cria. Cria is the name of the babies. Cria, C-R-I-A. It's a funny word. It's a Spanish word that means young or offspring. There's not a direct translation into English. It's also used, strangely, of the young of dolphins and whales, and also for llamas. They have this interaction. They're nosy as well. They're curious. They're inquisitive. No, they're nosy. They really want to be in the midst of everything that's going on. And they come over, and there was one day I had some wood that was cut to length but needed splitting into logs, and it was in a place that was near where the stable was. I was chopping these rounds into logs for the log burning stove for the fire. It makes quite a noise, whacking with the axe and the sound, and it splits. And then I was tossing them into a metal trailer that was nearby. There's all this noise going on, and I suddenly glanced up, and there was a semicircle of alpacas who all come close to, what is he doing? What's he up to? And so they'd come, and they weren't put off by the noise, and these bits of wood being flung across from where I was working. They were curious about what was going on, but they also felt like they were judging me. So, no, I wouldn't do it like that if I was you. They're watching all of the detail of the interactions, and they like to be close to what's going on, but not too close. Because they're so soft, people like to, the fleece is amazing. It's going to be sort of, as you get towards shearing time, which you do once a year, it's going to be around about 6 inches long. When it's wet, it gets a bit flattened down, but when it dries, you get a bit of rain, and they look awful, and they go grey because it's just dirty. But they're dry, clean animals. When the sun comes out, when the wind blows, all of this dirt that was there kind of turns to dust and comes off, and it fluffs up, and they've got this lovely, fluffy teddy bear kind of look to them, which is just amazing. But it's beautiful and soft. And anybody who comes to, they want to reach out and touch, then feel how soft it is. And the alpacas go, whoa, no. And they move away. They walk very quietly and sedately, and they look like very slow animals, except they're not. And if they want to run, there is no way that you can catch them. And I've had times when I've left the gate open in the wrong place, and they're going, I need to go and stop them, and I can't catch them. I can't get in front of them.
So what do you do?
There was one day I was doing some sweeping on the road, and I'd opened the gate because I drove in with the vehicle, quickly went to the shed, grabbed the brush, came out. I knew they were there in the car park sort of area, but they never bothered with open gates in the past. And this time, oh, look, he's opened a gate. I wonder what's going on over there. So they moved towards this open gate. What were they up to? I have no idea. I've got the car, and I've moved, but they're in front of me now, and I'm pushing them with, oh no. I ended up having to stop that, and I ended up jumping a fence to get into the field, and they're going along the road past this open gate. Oh, this is exciting. You could see they were all getting just a little bit excited. I jumped this fence, ran the length of this field, jumped the fence again to get in front of them. But there was still sort of 6 or 8 of them had got ahead of me anyway, and there's no way I had to let them all go, and they're all kind of, it's exciting. We're going off on an adventure. So I'm trying to find a way of heading them off and allowing them to go somewhere, but in a way I can then scoop them up and send them back up. I ended up sending them up the drive back towards the house. The house there's all the garden and all the flowers and the stuff in the garden. And there's a path then which goes in, and I think, so I got on the phone quickly to my wife and said, quick, just, can you open the gate? The alpacas are coming. What? No, I'll tell you in a minute. Just open the gate because they're coming. So they're all running up the drive towards the house. We managed to scoop them around, send them back through a gate and back into the field. And they were all so excited with themselves because they had this adventure. They're like the stimulation of changes, and they like moving. We're going to go this way. And they go off down a particular path to a different field, and they just love that. Generally, they've got a lot of open space that they can pick and choose, have a little routine. They'll go somewhere in the morning, work their way back, and by lunchtime, they're over here. And then by the evening, when I'm likely to be feeding them, they're kind of close. And then as soon as I appear, they'll come over to the stable ready to be fed. And then they finished, and they'll go out. Stable's open, but they won't stay in there. Normally, they will just go out. But they don't really like to stay in the stable. And I provided this for you. This is to keep you warm and dry. And they don't want to be, they're happy to be fed there, but they don't want to stay there overnight. An interesting animal that you need to take time around to start observing how they interact with each other. But that thing I mentioned earlier about them being really calming, they're just really calming and nice to be around because it slows you down and you just get a lovely feel from being around them. It calms you. Not just externally, but internally, it calms your spirit, your soul. It seems to connect. I'm of the opinion that some people have got an alpaca gene, which means that they connect with alpacas more than other people. This isn't true. I don't think there is a gene, but there is that experience. Some people really get alpacas. Everyone likes an alpaca, especially when the babies are so cute and they're fluffy and, they're nice animals. But some people really connect with alpacas. The thing that surprised me was that there were people who listened to my podcast who have alpacas, and that's what I was aiming for. There are people who listen to the podcast who are never going to be in a position where they can have alpacas themselves. What are they listening for? Well, they're listening to experience what I'm experiencing, to be able to be invited to the farm with me. I can tell the stories about Millie, the matriarch. She's the older girl who she leads the way. Right from when she first came, she led the way down the path. She didn't know where she was going. Follow me. She's heading off down this path, and the rest of them are following her. And they've always tended to follow. She's got a bit slower now. She's the oldest one we've got.
How old is she?
And she's going to be 18, almost 19. She'll be 19 this year.
Can people come and visit? Is that what you're offering?
We used to do that. We when this jolly old pandemic got in the way, so we couldn't have people. We couldn't have the gatherings. Couldn't have people coming. Mm-hmm. We kind of came to a stop, and the cost of insurance and the thing, and realizing just how much time it takes to do the preparation before people come. We do want to share the experience, but trying to find the way of doing it. So some people will do walking with alpacas, so they have a halter and a lead, and people will actually lead the alpacas. We didn't ever do that, but we did do walking in the alpacas or with the alpacas in a group. They're off down the end of the valley. We would walk down and we'd be around, and some of them would go, oh, so some visitors, better go check them out. And they'd come over, and some would keep a distance and some would come closer, but we were right in the middle talking about them, and then they'd go back to grazing. And so it was a different kind of experience, and which we tried to give people. And we found that the alpacas became much more relaxed when we weren't having lots of visitors.
Makes sense.
Which is not to say you shouldn't have visitors, but I'm not saying that. But we were just aware with ours there was a kind of a difference. Some people say, "Oh, could you bring your alpacas to our wedding? We've got a wedding reception." Oh, I don't think so. You've got a lovely white dress, and they spit. And if you've got people around who want to touch them, want to get, and then one of their panic defenses is that they'll spit to keep the distance, and it's green gunk. It's partly digested grass, basically. The thought of mixing on a special day with all those cameras around, mixing alpacas and a white dress, I was thinking, I'm not sure this is a good idea. But you can come another time. We have had hen parties. We had before the wedding. The bride and friends have come and spent time with the alpacas. That's a different kind of thing. We were doing that, and we just found that it was a season that we've moved on from, and we're not going back to that at the moment.
I have to say, I learned so much about podcasting from you, but now the alpaca, I've been in Peru and I've seen them. Right. And it's really true. They have this, in a way, elegance and calming effect on you, and you just take the time and observe them. There's also the parallels between observing the animals, but when you have a podcast, you're also observing your guest, and you're curious and you want to know what the other person is talking about.
Thanks, Susanne. See you again soon.
What are you taking away from this alpaca episode? Take it from the Ironwoman. We have episodes every Monday. Chime in, listen to cool stories. You can learn all the time. Don't shy away. And Take It from the Ironwoman is also the book, Global Business Coaching with Sports Parallels. Thank you for your support. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.